Hi everyone. Welcome to the channel. Today's story is about Nicole. From Fear to Freedom, Nicole's story of surviving domestic abuse, inspirational true story. Introduction. Nicole's story is not just one of survival, it is a testament to the quiet, powerful courage that so many women are forced to summon in the face of unthinkable pain. On the surface, she appeared to live a normal life, a husband, 2 young children, and a home in the suburbs. But behind closed doors, Nicole was enduring years of emotional, verbal, and physical abuse trapped in a marriage that stripped her of safety, dignity, and hope. For years, she bore the weight of silence, shielding her children from the worst of it and convincing herself that she could endure just a little longer. But when her daughter witnessed an act of violence that left Nicole bruised and broken, something inside her shifted. She realized that surviving wasn't enough. She had to escape. Not only for herself, but for her children's future. What follows is the deeply personal and inspiring journey of how Nicole broke free from the cycle of abuse, rebuilt her life from nothing, and transformed her pain into purpose. Through fear, setbacks, legal battles, and nights filled with doubt, she fought to reclaim her identity, find healing, and offer that same strength to others. This is a story for anyone who has ever felt powerless and needs to be reminded that hope is not lost, that healing is possible, and that every ending can become a beginning. The illusion of safety. Nicole sat at the kitchen table, staring at the chipped edge of her coffee mug. From the outside, her life looked almost enviable at 2 children, a husband with a steady job, and a house in the suburbs. But behind the beige walls and family portraits was a life steeped in fear. Her husband, Darren, had once been charming, attentive, even romantic. But that had been years ago, before the first shove, the first scream, the first time she had to explain a bruise's clumsiness. At first, the abuse came in subtle forms: sharp words, controlling glances, disapproving silences. He'd decide what she wore, who she spoke to, even what she ate. Nicole told herself he was just protective, that he loved her deeply. But over time, the control mutated into cruelty. It wasn't long before the emotional torment turned physical. Nicole had 2 children with Darren Ava, age 7, and Lucas, 4. She loved them more than life itself. But even they weren't spared the ripple effects of their father's rage. Though Darren never laid a hand on them, he screamed so loud the windows seemed to rattle. He smashed dishes, he punched walls. Once, Ava had wet herself during one of his tirades, trembling behind the sofa while Lucas sobbed silently in Nicole's arms. The worst part wasn't the bruises or the broken furniture, it was the erosion of Nicole's sense of self. She used to be a bright woman with dreams of being a social worker. She once believed she could make a difference in the world. Now, she barely had the confidence to look herself in the mirror. Every insult Darren hurled chipped away at her identity. You're worthless. No one else would want you. You're lucky I'm still here. She believed him. Each day became a carefully choreographed routine of survival. She woke early, packed the kids' lunches, and tried to keep everything spotless. Any mistake might trigger Darren's wrath. She avoided phone calls from friends and stopped going to her weekly book club. She wore long sleeves in summer and avoided eye contact at the grocery store. Her life was built around not provoking him. Still, he found reasons. It wasn't until the night he slammed her into the closet door that something inside Nicole cracked, not out of fear for herself, but for her children. As she lay on the floor, her lip bleeding and her shoulder dislocated, she saw Ava standing in the hallway, clutching her teddy bear and crying silently. It was then Nicole knew this couldn't go on. She had to find a way out. The whisper of escape. Nicole didn't sleep that night. She sat curled on the bathroom floor, her injured shoulder throbbing, her mind racing. Darren had stormed out after the incident, slamming the front door behind him. Maybe he went to the bar, maybe to his brother's. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she finally understood this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about protecting her children from a future soaked in fear. The next morning, she moved like a ghost. She hid the swelling with makeup, pulled her cardigan tightly across her bruised shoulder, and made breakfast for Ava and Lucas like everything was normal. They were quiet, too quiet. Ava avoided her gaze, and Lucas kept rubbing his eyes as if trying to wipe away the memory of the night before. When Darren returned late that morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. He brought flower-scrumpled, half-dead carnations and handed them to Nicole with a flat, "I'm sorry." She nodded silently, not trusting herself to speak. The apology meant nothing. She knew the cycle too well. This was the honeymoon face, the false calm, before another storm. But that apology gave her time. Nicole began planning in secret. She used her children's nap time to research shelters and domestic violence hotlines. Every Google search she deleted, every call made from borrowed phones. She couldn't risk Darren finding out. He had threatened her before. "If you ever try to leave me, I'll take the kids. You'll never see them again." She started putting away small amounts of cash coins and small bills in a tampon box hidden behind the bathroom cabinet. She took out an old prepaid phone she found in a drawer, charged it in her car, and stored the number to a local women's shelter under the name Dr. M. It took 3 weeks to prepare. During that time, Nicole remained composed on the outside, while inside her heart beat with quiet panic. She memorized every exit in the house, packed a small backpack for the kids with essentials, and rehearsed what she would say to them when it was time. She couldn't tell them too soon. Ava was still too young to keep a secret. Then one Thursday afternoon, fate opened a door. Darren called from work, saying he'd be home late. A work dinner, he said. Nicole's hands trembled as she hung up. This was her window. She told Ava and Lucas they were going on a surprise trip, carefully packing their things with snacks and books. As soon as Darren's car didn't pull into the driveway by sunset, Nicole loaded the kids into the car. The shelter's address was in her mind, etched there by desperation and quiet hope. With her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the radio, Nicole drove through the night. She didn't look back once. She had nothing left behind, only the life she was trying to save. The safe house. The shelter was nestled behind a nondescript building on a quiet side street, with no sign or name on the door, intentionally anonymous. Nicole had to press a buzzer and give a code word before they were let in. Her hands shook as she held Lucas on one hip and Ava by the hand. A woman with kind eyes and a clipboard welcomed them inside with a warm but firm tone, locking the door behind them. Nicole felt the fear begin to drain from her limbs, replaced by exhaustion so deep she nearly collapsed into the nearest chair. The staff gently took her aside, gave the children juice and coloring books, and walked her through intake questions. She answered them numbly, still in survival mode. "Are you in immediate danger?" "No, not now." "Do you believe he will come looking for you?" "Yes." "Do you have a restraining order?" "Not yet." That night, they were assigned a small room with 2 bunk beds and a dresser. It wasn't luxurious, but to Nicole, it was sanctuary. It was the first place in years where she could sleep without fear of being woken by yelling or fists. She curled into bed with Ava beside her and Lucas on her chest. The 3 of them fell into a dreamless, silent sleep-hone without fear pounding at the walls. Over the next few days, the shelter became their bubble. The staff helped Nicole begin the legal process, filing a restraining order, documenting past abuse, setting up appointments with legal aid. They arranged counseling sessions and support groups. At first, Nicole sat silently in those circles of women listening to stories that echoed hers like painful ghost songs. But slowly, she began to speak. Her voice was hoarse with emotion the first time she told the story of the closet door. One of the other women, a mother of 3 from the city, reached over and squeezed her hand. No judgment, no pity. Just understanding it was the first time Nicole didn't feel alone in her pain. Ava began to open up too. She spoke to a child therapist provided by the shelter, drawing pictures that were full of storms and dark clouds. Lucas was quieter, but calmer, his nightmares less frequent. Nicole watched them begin to heal and knew she had done the right thing. But escaping was only the first step. There were still battles ahead. Court dates, custody hearings, financial insecurity. Nicole didn't have a job. Darren never let her work, and her savings were barely enough for gas. But for the first time in years, she wasn't frozen by fear. She was beginning to believe something different. She was beginning to believe she was strong. The battle for freedom. The legal process was grueling. Nicole had never stood before a judge before, let alone tried to prove she deserved to protect her own children from their father. Darren, of course, denied everything. He filed a counterclaim, accusing her of emotional instability and abducting the children. He hired a lawyer. Nicole had only the shelter's legal advocatia woman named Monique, with a fire in her eyes and compassion in her voice. "You're not alone," Monique told her after their first strategy meeting. "You have more strength than you know, Nicole, and you're not crazy. You're a mother fighting to keep her kids safe." Nicole clung to those words when she sat in court for the first time, hands clenched in her lap, her mouth dry with fear. Darren stood tall in a suit and tie, trying to look respectable. But Nicole brought evidence photos of bruises, medical records, and written statements from neighbors who had heard the shouting through the walls. What saved her case, though, was her voice. When the judge asked her why she left, Nicole stood and told the truth about the screaming, the isolation, the fear, about the way Darren called her names in front of their kids, about how she found Ava curled under a table during a violent outburst, about how she once slept in a locked bathroom, clutching Lucas like a shield. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. She was granted a temporary restraining order that day. Darren would have supervised visitation until further investigation. Nicole walked out of that courthouse with her head held higher than it had been in years. It was only the beginning, but it was a victory. With legal protection in place, Nicole turned her focus to rebuilding her life. She started attending weekly counseling, both one-on-one and group. She applied for housing assistance and child care vouchers. She filled out job applications during the hours her children were in school. One night, after reading Ava and Lucas to sleep, Nicole sat alone with a notebook. She listed everything she had lost: her home, her sense of safety, her dreams. Then she flipped to a new page and wrote everything she still had: her children, her freedom, her will to survive. She added something else at the bottom of the list, something that felt daring. Hope. She whispered it aloud, just to hear how it sounded. Hope. The word tasted strange and beautiful on her tongue. For so long, hope had felt like a luxury, something other women had, something not meant for her. But now, in the soft glow of her new life's fragile beginning, it felt like a seed she could plant. Nicole didn't know how everything would turn out. The road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in years, she had choices. She had her voice. And she had a future to fight for. Starting from scratch. Life outside the shelter began with an empty apartment and a mattress on the floor. But to Nicole, it felt like the beginning of freedom. The apartment was a modest 2-bedroom unit in a building with faded brick walls and creaky floors. But there were locks on the doors that only she had keys to. No yelling, no footsteps she feared, just quiet. The shelter's re-entry program helped cover the deposit and first month's rent. Nicole enrolled in a local workforce reintegration, class basic computer training, resume writing, interview skills. She hadn't worked in nearly a decade. Darren had always called working women selfish and insisted a real wife stayed home. Nicole had bought into that lie for years, believing she was being a good mother by giving up her independence. Now, independence was everything. Her first job was as a part-time receptionist at a local nonprofit. It didn't pay much, but it came with something more valuable: dignity. She took the bus to work, left notes in Ava's lunchbox, and hung Lucas's artwork on the fridge. Every paycheck felt like proof that she could provide. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. The children adapted in their own ways. Ava was still jumpy around loud noises and flinched whenever someone raised their voice. Lucas clung to Nicole more than ever, afraid to sleep alone. Nicole enrolled them in a children's trauma therapy program. There were setbacks nights filled with tears, school meltdowns, but there were also small wins. Like the first time Ava laughed again while playing with her classmates, or when Lucas started sleeping through the night. Nicole still had to deal with Darren. Court-ordered visitation meant she had to see him brief, supervised exchanges that left her heart racing every time. He'd smirk like none of it had happened. He never apologized, never even acknowledged the hurt he caused. But now, Nicole didn't need his permission to live. She kept boundaries. She followed the court's guidelines, and she leaned on her support system, other women from the shelter, her case manager, and her therapist. The days were long and often hard, but Nicole had developed something she never knew. She had resilience. She found moments of peace in simple things: a quiet morning coffee, walking Ava to school, reading bedtime stories without fear of an outburst interrupting. Every time she signed her name on a form, dropped off a rent check, or set a boundary, she felt herself reclaiming a piece of her life. She'd been told for so long that she was weak, incapable, nothing without him. But now, she was proving herself wrong. Nicole kept a journal where she wrote down one thing she was proud of each day. Some days it was big, like saying no and meaning it. Other days, it was simply, I got out of bed, I showed up, I'm still here. And every day, that was enough. Rising stronger, Nicole's world began to expand. After 6 months in her new apartment, she was offered a full-time position at the nonprofit and administrative assistant role with benefits and room for growth. Her supervisor, a warm woman named Cheryl, had once been in Nicole's shoes. She recognized the quiet strength Nicole carried and encouraged her to pursue something more. "You've got a gift with people," Cheryl told her one afternoon. "Have you ever thought about going back to school?" Nicole hadn't. The idea had felt like something for other women, not for single mothers climbing out of trauma. But that night, after the kids were in bed, she sat on the floor with her laptop and began researching programs, social work, counseling, advocacy, all the things she once dreamed of before Darren dimmed her light. 2 weeks later, she enrolled in night classes at the local community college. It wasn't easy. She juggled work, parenting, homework, and court appearances. Darren still tried to manipulate her through legal loopholes and passive-aggressive texts. But Nicole had learned how to document everything, how to respond with clarity and calm, and most importantly, how not to fall into his traps. The fear he once ruled her with had lost its grip. Ava began to thrive in school. She joined a reading club and started making friends again. Lucas loved drawing and spent hours coloring rainbows and superheroes. Nicole kept their schedules steady, their routines predictable, giving them a life where chaos no longer reigned. Each bedtime kiss became a quiet celebration. Another day safe, another day forward. In her support group, Nicole began mentoring newer arrivals women still in the first throes of escape. She would sit beside them, listen, and offer the one thing that had once seemed so distant to her: belief. "You're not broken," she'd say. "You're rebuilding." She shared her story at a Women's Center fundraiser that spring, standing behind a microphone in a borrowed blazer, her hands trembling but her voice steady. The audience listened in silence as she spoke of fear, survival, and the courage to leave. At the end, the room erupted in applause, not for her pain, but for her power. Afterward, a woman approached her in tears. "You just told my story," she whispered. Nicole hugged her, understanding the weight behind those words. That night, she walked home under the stars, her heart full. Not of pain, not of anger, but of purpose. She had survived, and now she was helping others do the same. Her life wasn't perfect, bills were still tight, the future was still uncertain, but it no longer scared her. Nicole had risen from the ashes, and she was only just beginning, rewriting her future. Nicole's nights were often spent bent over textbooks, highlighters in hand, the glow of her desk lamp painting shadows on the wall. After the kids went to bed, she would study with fierce determination, her mind grasping concepts that once seemed out of reach: trauma-informed care, child advocacy, crisis intervention. Every chapter she read felt like a stitch in the tapestry of a new life she was building, not only for herself, but for others who still sat in silence, waiting for their turn to break free. One night, Ava wandered into her room with a blanket over her shoulders. "Mom, are you going to be a counselor for real?" Nicole smiled, pulled her daughter onto her lap, and said, "Yes, baby, that's the plan." Ava beamed. "You're going to help people like us?" The tears came unexpectedly, warm and full. Nicole kissed the top of her daughter's head and held her close. "That's exactly what I'm going to do." By her second year of night classes, Nicole had earned enough credits to qualify for a certificate in family advocacy, and she began working part-time at the same shelter that once saved her life. Her job was intake support, welcoming new arrivals, ensuring they had toiletries, food, and a safe place to sleep. But more than that, she became a presence of calm in the storm. She remembered every detail of her first night at the shelter: the cold, fear, the guilt, the shame. So when she looked into the eyes of the new women crossing that threshold, she didn't see brokenness. She saw the same fire she once carried, faint but burning. Nicole began to tell her story more often. She was invited to speak at community events and church groups, offering education on domestic abuse and how to recognize early warning signs. She told the truth, not to dwell in her past, but to show the power of transformation. Not everyone in her life understood. Some old acquaintances whispered that she was airing dirty laundry. Some judged her for not staying for the kids. But Nicole had stopped letting those voices weigh her down. The opinions of people who had never seen her bruises or heard her cries no longer mattered. The children were thriving. Lucas started soccer. Ava joined a girls' empowerment group. They still had questions, still carried shadows, but the light in their eyes was growing brighter with each passing season. Nicole took them on weekend hikes, read bedtime stories about brave heroines, and filled their home with music and laughter. And for the first time since she could remember, Nicole did something she never thought she'd do again. She began to dream. Not just for survival, not just for safety, but for joy, for love, for a life where she could be wholly, unapologetically herself, love on her terms. It was a warm September morning when Nicole met David. She hadn't been looking for anyone. Love had been the furthest thing from her mind for years, buried under layers of distrust, fear, and exhaustion. But healing has a strange way of making room for things you thought you'd never feel again. David was a volunteer at a community event Nicole was speaking at. A quiet man with kind eyes and a gentle voice, he stayed after her talk to help fold chairs and clean up. He didn't shower her with compliments or charm. Instead, he asked questions, real ones. How did you find the courage to leave? What helped you most when you started over? What do you need now to keep going? No one had ever asked her those things before, not like that, not with such quiet sincerity. They began meeting for coffee every couple of weeks, then walks in the park with the kids. Slowly, carefully, Nicole allowed herself to feel something unfamiliar but grounding trust. David never pressed, never probed. He simply showed up, consistently, respectfully. One evening, months later, as they sat on a bench while Lucas played on the swings and Ava read nearby, David turned to her and said, "You're the strongest woman I've ever known. But I also want to remind you, you don't have to be strong every minute of the day. You're allowed to lean on someone too." The words unraveled something deep inside Nicole. She hadn't leaned on anyone in years. She had carried the weight of trauma, fear, motherhood, and rebuilding all on her own shoulders. And here was someone offering not to rescue her, but to walk beside her. They took things slow, Nicole was open with her boundaries, and David honored everyone. He understood that trust for her was earned breath by breath, not promised with a smile. He never got angry when she needed space. He celebrated her milestones, big and small. He supported her continued education, came to her advocacy talks, and became someone Ava and Lucas felt safe with. Love for Nicole didn't come with fireworks this time. It came like sunrise after a long, storm-gentle, patient, and undeniable. But most importantly, it came on her terms. And that made all the difference. Nicole knew she didn't need a man to complete her. She had already rebuilt herself from the ground up. But choosing love again, not from fear or desperation, but from strength and clarity, was the final affirmation that she was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, a mother, a protector, and now a woman walking boldly into the next chapter of her life with her heart open, her head held high, and her children by her side. Life reclaimed. 3 years had passed since Nicole fled the house that once felt like a prison. Time had not erased the scarsome still whispered in the dark, in the creak of a door, in the way she occasionally startled at sudden sounds, but it had transformed them into something else. Reminders of what she had endured and overcome. Nicole was now in her final semester of college, just months away from earning her degree in social work. She balanced it with her job at the women's shelter, where she had been promoted to case coordinator. Every day, she helped women escape the same darkness she had once lived in, walking them through the maze of legal filings, housing options, and trauma counseling. She held their hands when they cried. She reminded them of their worth when they forgot it. Her story had become a beacon shared at conferences, in shelters, in classrooms. People began asking her to consult on policy reform, community outreach, and education for law enforcement on how to better support domestic violence survivors. Nicole's voice, once silenced by fear, had become a force for change. At home, the rhythm of life was steady and sweet. Her apartment was no longer bare. Framed photos lined the walls. Ava's art show, Lucas in his soccer jersey, and one of all three of them smiling on a mountain trail, sun spilling over their shoulders. Their home was small, but filled with light, real light, not the flickering illusion of peace Nicole had once tried to maintain. Ava, now 10, was fierce and thoughtful. She had recently written a short story about a girl who escaped a castle, guarded by a dragon, not with a sword, but with courage. Lucas, always full of questions, told everyone at school that his mom helped rescue heroes. One quiet evening, Nicole stood at the window, watching them play in the courtyard below. Laughter floated up to her like music. Behind her, David read a book at the kitchen table, glancing up now and then to smile at her. She smiled back, not from obligation, not to hide pain, but because her heart was genuinely full. Nicole would never forget where she came from. She didn't want to. Her past was not her shame, it was her origin story. From it, she had emerged not only as a survivor, but as a mother, an advocate, and a healer. She no longer lived defined by what had been done to her, but by what she had done in response. She had taken the broken pieces and built something stronger than before. A life, a future, a legacy of strength carved from the rubble of silence and pain. Nicole closed the window, whispered a prayer of thanks, and walked into the glow of her reclaimed life ready for whatever came next. Conclusion. Nicole's story is more than a tale of escaping domestic violence. It's a vivid portrait of resilience, transformation, and the healing power of reclaiming one's voice. From the depths of fear and emotional isolation, she found the courage to walk away from the life that was destroying her and her children. And in doing so, she stepped into the unknown, choosing uncertainty over abuse, choosing freedom over fear. Her journey was anything but easy. She faced legal battles, financial hardship, emotional trauma, and the daunting task of rebuilding a life from the ground up. But step by step, she created a new reality, one rooted in peace, self-worth, and empowerment. Along the way, she rediscovered the woman she once was and became someone even stronger. Nicole now stands as a symbol of hope for other women still trapped in silence. Her experience has not only shaped her into a fierce advocate for survivors, but also given her a platform to educate, inspire, and fight for change in how society understands and responds to domestic violence. What she once believed would be the end of her life turned out to be the beginning of a powerful new chapter. Nicole did not just survive, she rose, and in rising, she lit the way for others to follow. Lessons learned from Nicole's story. 1. Abuse doesn't always leave visible scars. Nicole's experience reminds us that domestic violence is not always physical. It can be emotional, psychological, and verbal. The damage caused by manipulation, isolation, and control can be just as devastating as physical harm. 2. Survival requires courage, but leaving requires even more. It takes immense strength to survive abuse, but even greater bravery to make the terrifying decision to leave, especially when children and safety are at stake. Nicole's courage proves that escaping is not weakness, but the ultimate act of self-love and protection. 3. Children see more than we think. Nicole's turning point came not from her own pain, but from seeing its impact on her children. Her story teaches us that staying for the kids in an abusive home often causes more harm than good children deserve a peaceful, safe environment, not just two parents. 4. Help is out there even when it feels like no one sees you. Through shelters, support groups, legal aid, and trauma counselors, Nicole found people who believed in her when she could barely believe in herself. There are lifelines available, and no one has to walk the path to freedom alone. 5. Healing is not linear, and that's okay. Recovery from abuse doesn't follow a straight line. Nicole faced setbacks, fears, and emotional hurdles, but each step forward mattered. Progress is found in consistency, self-compassion, and the willingness to keep going, even on hard days. 6. You are not defined by what you've survived. Nicole's past didn't define her future. She chose to rewrite her narrative, turning her trauma into purpose, her pain into passion. Every survivor has the right to reclaim their story and become more than what they endured. 7. Love can return when you're ready. Nicole's eventual relationship with David showed that love after abuse is possible, but only on a survivor's terms. Healthy love doesn't demand healing, it honors it. And true love will never ask you to sacrifice your safety, peace, or voice. 8. Every ending holds the seed of a beginning. Nicole's escape marked not the end of her life, but the beginning of her rebirth. Her journey shows that even in the darkest chapter, a new future is possible with hope, support, and unwavering determination. Thanks for listening, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspirational life stories. If you have your own story, please send to us in order to share to the public. Remember, your story can help and change someone's life.